The bug type is one of the worst types in all of Pokemon. Not only do bug types have insanely low base stat totals, but they also are weak to so many common types in this game. This whole situation is made even worse when you realize that bug types really aren't super effective against much. With that being said though, I really wanted to give myself a challenge for this video, so I'm gonna try to beat Pokemon Y only using bug types. Along with that, to make this run that much more difficult, I'm also gonna be adding on the hardcore Nuzlocke rules. With all that being said, I'm ready to get into the run, so I name myself Zwiggo and start my journey through Kalos. After I wake up to a fletchling absolutely nailing my head, I get some clothes on, then go outside and meet my neighbors. They decide they want to give me a nickname, but the nicknames they offer me are pretty trash, so I choose my own, and of course, it's Big Man. They then give me the option at a starter, and for the first time in ever, I decide to pick Chespin. Normally, I'd never pick Chespin because he's one of the worst starters of all time, but it's just so my rival can have a Finnegan, and that makes this run just a bit more difficult. I now learn how to catch a Pokemon for the billionth time, then head into the forest so I can catch my first Pokemon, Weedle. After catching Weedle, I give her the nickname Cinnamon, then after beating up a couple of preschoolers, I find myself in Sandaloon City. Once I get into the city, I evolve Cinnamon all the way into Beedrill, then I steal some roller skates off this dweeb, and after doing that, I'm able to challenge the first gym. The first gym leader is Viola, and she leads battle with Surskit as I lead with Cinnamon. Viola starts out by hitting me with a quick attack as I go for a fury attack, and it does a good amount of damage to Surskit. On the next turn, I outspeed, and I'm able to go for another fury attack, hitting 3 times, finishing off Surskit as that leads into Vivillon. Against Vivillon, I start out by going for a focus energy as Vivillon hits me with an infestation that hits me every single turn. I now go for a fury attack, but it ends up missing as Vivillon hits me with yet another infestation. On the next turn, I connect with a fury attack, and it brings Vivillon down into the yellow as she decides to go for a Harden. On the final turn of this battle, I go for a fury attack on Vivillon, and it ends up hitting twice, getting a critical hit both times, finishing her off, and that wins me my first gym badge. The first thing I do after leaving that gym is catch another Pokemon on my next route. This Pokemon is a Combee, and unfortunately it's a male, so I won't be able to evolve him. Unfortunate that I can't evolve Combee, but the show must go on, so I move on to Lumio City and meet the professor. He just starts randomly battling me out of nowhere, but it's fine because my Beedrill is an absolute god. As I'm leaving the professor, I meet this guy Lysander whose hairline is absolutely diabolical. Like, who let him have this? Regardless of that atrocity, I decide to move on to the next few routes, and eventually I make it onto Route 6 where I'm able to catch a Pokemon. The Pokemon I catch is a Venipede that I nicknamed Vanilla, and as I make my way further into this route, I actually catch another Pokemon, and it's an Incada. I didn't actually realize that I was still on Route 6. I thought I was on like Route 8 or 7 maybe. I'm not really sure what I thought. Regardless, I corrected this mistake pretty quickly. Before the second gym, I ended up getting rid of Nincada because I realized it was an encounter I couldn't have. Also, while I had her on the team, I didn't use her in any battles because Nincada just sucks. Anyways though, I'm off towards the Pokemon Mansion to get myself a Pokeflute. After helping out this billionaire get his dog, he makes me and Shauna watch this fireworks show. And can I just mention, who just randomly does a fireworks show? That's crazy. Just one random night wanted to pull out the fireworks. Like, that's nuts. Either way, he ends up coughing up the Pokeflute so I can make my way to the Snorlax and wake him up. Once this guy is finished with his majestic solo, I make my way into the next route and catch myself another Pokemon, this one being Volbeat. I then battle my rivals in a double battle, and eventually I find myself in Ambrit Town. In Ambrit Town, all I do is get sent off to do some chores, and I've got to go fight a ton of Team Flare members, and these guys are just losers. After getting through them, I save this scientist and find myself in Silage City where I'm ready to challenge the next gym, except I'm not. Once I got to this city, I realized that I missed out on so many encounters. The game had been pretty easy thus far with Beedrill, but it definitely won't be later on, so I decided to backtrack and catch all of them. I ended up catching 3 Pokemon. The first one was a Dwebble that I named Juniper, the second one was a Burmy that I named Allspice, and the last one was a Scatterbug that I named Cloves. I then ended up evolving some of my team and EV training some of my team as well in preparation for this next gym, cause it could get really difficult. Either way though, Grant leads the battle with Amora as I lead with Wormadam. As I was leveling up my Wormadam to the level cap, I started playing around with hidden power just a little bit, and I figured out my Wormadam has the hidden power Steel. That means when I hit Amora with it, it's a 4 times super effective move, and that leads into the next Pokemon, Tyron. Against Tyron, I outspeed and go for a hidden power that brings him all the way down into the red. He then hits me with a Rock Tomb that brings me down to 33 HP, and on the next turn he heals as I go for another hidden power. With Tyron down into the red and Grant with no more hyper potions, I decided to switch out just in case because of that Rock Tomb I'm now slower than Tyron. I end up moving into Dwebble, finishing off Tyron, and winning myself my second gym badge. After that gym, I head towards Geosenge Town, and unfortunately, I meet up with Team Flare again. As I'm beating the brakes off of them, I end up evolving my Scatterbug all the way up to Vivillon, and after that, I finally make my way into Geosenge Town and challenge Corinna. Her Lucarios are no match for my Beedrill, so she ends up walking away in shame as I then make my way into Reflection Cave. In Reflection Cave, I reflect on the fact that 69% of my viewers are actually subscribed, so honestly, I was gonna ask you guys to sub, but don't ruin the number. While I'm in Reflection Cave, Tierno, flashes me. And after getting that, I'm able to move on to the next city. Once I get into the city, I have a rival battle with Serena, and thanks to Cinnamon and Dwebble, I get through that pretty easily. I then go to the gym, and once I get here, my Whirlipede evolves into Scolipede, and I challenge Corinna for my third gym badge. She leads the battle with Menfu, as I lead with Vivillon. The first thing I do is start to spam Draining Kiss, and after about 3 or so, Corinna's out of Hyper Potions, and Menfu ends up going down. Next out, Corinna sends Machoke, so I make a switch into Volbeat. On the switch in, Volbeat tanks minimal damage from a Rock Tomb, and honestly, I was sending in Volbeat to die, so this is a little bit shocking. On the next turn, I hit Machoke with a Confuse Ray, and he ends up hitting himself with Confusion. On the next turn, I set up a Tail Glow as Machoke hits himself with Confusion once again. I then set up a second Tail Glow as Machoke hits himself with Confusion for the third time in a row. On the next turn, I heal up with Moonlight, and Machoke ends up snapping out of the Confusion. On that turn, he ends up hitting me with a Rock Tomb, doing minimal damage, as on the following turn, I'm able to take him out with a Signal Beam. Last out is Hawlucha, and Hawlucha starts out by going for a Hone Claws, as I start out by going for a Signal Beam. On the next turn, Hawlucha sets up another Hone Claws as I'm able to hit a second Signal Beam, and it actually confuses. Hawlucha, being confused, hits himself with Confusion, and another Signal Beam puts him down into the red. On the next turn, Hawlucha hits himself with Confusion once more, and that finishes off my battle with Corinna. Honestly, that was a crazy battle. Volbeat went nuts with the Confusion there, and that ends up being my third badge. Once I get that gym finished, I'm now able to make my way to the top of this tower and fight Corinna yet again. She loses just as usual, and I'm now able to make my way into Coumarin City, where I've got another rival battle. I'm able to win this battle with just Dwebble alone, and after finishing that battle up, I head into the gym, evolve Dwebble into a Crustle so I can challenge my next gym. Ramos leads the battle with Jumpluff as I lead with Crustle. Ramos starts off by hitting me with an Acrobatics, doing minimal damage as I go for a Rock Blast and 2 Connect, finishing off Jumpluff. With Jumpluff down, Weepinbell comes out, and against Weepinbell, I start out by going for a Bug Bite that does a really good amount of damage, bringing Weepinbell down into the red as I get hit by a Poison Powder. It's at this point where Ramos starts to spam heal, and after a couple of Hyper Potions, eventually Weepinbell goes down and leads into the final Pokemon, Go-Go. I'm a little worried for Crustal's health, so I decide to switch out into Beedrill, who takes almost no damage from a 4x not very effective Grass Knot. This leads me into going for a Pin Missile that hits twice, bringing Go-Go down to half as I get hit by a Bulldoze. Thanks to my bug typing, this Bulldoze doesn't do too much damage, it only brings me down to 46, as in the next turn, the old goat goes down to another Pin Missile, and that wins me my 4th badge. Now that I've got that badge, I've got to deal with a lot more of Team Flare at this power plant. You've got to fight so many Team Flare members, and on top of all that, you've got to witness this awful knock-knock joke. Like, seriously, Game Freak, what are you doing to me? After finishing them off, I meet this really unreasonably tall man, then head into Lumio City, where I'm ready to challenge the 5th gym. Clement leads the battle with Emolga, as I lead with Crustle. The first thing that Clement does is go for a Volt Switch, and after he hits me with it, he switches out into Magneton, who gets hit by a Rock Slide. On the next turn, Magneton sets up an Electric Terrain as I go for a Dig, and on the following turn, I come up and finish off Magneton with a one-shot. Next out ends up being Heliolisk, so I decide to go for another Dig, and before I get that Dig off, I get hit by a Grass Knot that brings me down to 59 HP, and on the next turn, Heliolisk goes down to that Dig. Last out is Emolga. Emolga hits me with a Volt Switch that brings me down to 32 HP, as he then avoids a Rock Slide. On the next turn, Emolga hits me with an Aerial Ace and gets a critical hit, bringing me all the way down to 8 HP as I finally hit that Rock Slide, and Emolga goes down. With that, I win my 5th badge, and I'm off towards another rival battle. This rival battle, like most in this game, ends up going really easily as it leads me onto the Spooky House. Spooky House, more like Dookie House. I'm not really good at jokes. Regardless, the Spooky House wasn't that scary, and I'm off towards the 6th gym. In this fight with Valerie, she leads with Mawile as I lead with Vanilla. The first thing I do is go for a Sword Stance as Mawile sets up an Iron Defense. The next thing I do is go for a Dig, and eventually when I come back up, I bring Mawile down into the red as she hits me with a Crunch. I know Valerie's gonna heal here, so I decide to set up another Sword Stance, and after that, I go for another Dig, finishing off Mawile as next out comes Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime gets annihilated by a Poison Jab, and when Sylveon comes out, he experiences much of the same. Those two moves end up winning me my 6th badge, and they lead me on to the Pokeball Factory. This factory is crawling with team player members, and after getting through all of them, I end up getting myself a Master Ball. I now trudge through the snow to eventually make it to Anastar City. Once I get into the city, I realize I'm missing out on a potential Pokemon, so I fly back to a previous route and find myself a Heracross. This is where I end up making a pretty big potential mistake, and I end up throwing a Master Ball at Heracross. Now, normally in this game, you're supposed to use the Master Ball for a legendary, and specifically Yveltal or Xerneas, but I can't use it for them anymore because I used it on Heracross. This wouldn't be that big of a deal, but in order to progress the game, you have to catch Xerneas or Yveltal, so I'm kinda messed up here. It's whatever though, because that's a problem for a later time, and now that I've got Heracross, I'm able to go challenge the 7th gym. Olympia leads the battle with Sigilif as I lead with Crustle. Sigilif starts out by going for a Reflect as I go for a Rock Slide doing about half. On the next turn, Sigilif hits me with a Psychic, bringing me down to 102 as I'm able to go for another Rock Slide, finishing her off. Next out is Slowking, and against her, I start out by going for an X-Scissor that does about half as I get hit by a Yawn. Thankfully, Yawn doesn't put me asleep on the first turn, so on the next turn, I'm able to go for another X-Scissor, finishing off Slowking as that leads into the final Pokemon Meowstic. Unfortunately for Crustle, it's nap time, so she ends up falling asleep, and I decide to switch into Vivillon. Vivillon's a pretty beefy special attacker, so when I go for a Bug Buzz, it brings Meowstic all the way down into the red as she sets up a Calm Mind. This causes Olympia to heal, and with another Bug Buzz, I bring Meowstic down into the yellow, and one more Bug Buzz later, that's the end of the battle. After that gym, I'm now on to the climax of the story with none other than Team Flare. To finish them off, I've got to go through secret layer after secret layer, and eventually I get to this area where the secret weapon is, and it blows up like all of Geosenge Town. I mean, hey, what can you do? Geosenge Town really wasn't that cool anyways, so we're not really missing much. In this secret layer under Geosenge Town, I get to meet the legendary of this game, Yveltal. Or it might be pronounced Yveltal, I'm not really sure. Regardless, like I mentioned earlier, I don't actually have a Master Ball for this fight, so I've got to kind of play it really strange. The first thing I do is weaken Yveltal because I can't really kill him. If I do, then the battle just resets. I end up getting him just outside of the red, then I start to throw Ultra Ball after Ultra Ball and hope he doesn't end up killing me. He gets really close and brings my Scolipede all the way down to 2 HP, but after like 10 Ultra Balls, Yveltal finally gets in the ball and I'm able to challenge Lysander. Lysander leads the battle with Manxiao as I lead with Scolipede. My Scolipede is really fast, packed full of speed EVs, so I end up outspeeding Manxiao on the first turn and going for a Sword Stance. Manxiao decides to go for an Acrobatics, and that brings me down to 32 HP, so in the next turn, I decide to take Manxiao out with a Poison Jab. Next out is Pyroar, who just goes down to a Dig, and Honchkrow ends up going down to a Poison Jab. Last out is Lysander's ace Pokemon, Mega Gyarados. For this thing, I'm really scared because its defense stat is extremely high, but I think Vanilla can still one-shot, so I go for a Steamroller, and shockingly enough, it doesn't kill. It brings Gyarados all the way down into the red. I was pretty positive this would kill, but I guess I got a low damage roll. Either way, Gyarados ends up going for an Aqua Tail and misses, which gives me a chance to go for another Steamroller, and that might be the luckiest I've ever gotten in a run. Unfortunately, I didn't record the live audio for that bit, but just know I was going crazy. That all being said, I'm now off towards the final gym, and on my way there, I ended up catching myself a Durant. After catching that Durant, I get closer to the next gym, and I've got to fight so many rival battles, it's honestly kind of crazy. I was able to deal with all 3 of these rival fights with just Crustle and Scolipede. Honestly, storming through those battles showed me Crustle and Scolipede are some great Pokemon. Either way though, the next stop is Snowbell City, and once I get here, I end up going to the Pokemon Village to find the gym leader. After successfully tracking him down and sending him back to his gym, I'm on to the final gym battle of this run. Wolfric leads the battle with Abomasnow as I lead with Crustle. The first thing Abomasnow does is go for an Energy Ball that brings me down to 116 as I decide to go for a Shell Smash. On the next turn, I now outspeed Abomasnow, so I'm able to go for an X-Scissor and Abomasnow goes down. Next out is Cryogonal, and shockingly enough, I actually outspeed him as well, and a single Rock Slide's able to take him down. Last out is Avalugg, and even with Avalug's insanely high defense stat, I still ended up one-shotting with a single Rock Slide. That ended up being my final gym badge of this run, and that leads me on to Victory Road. In Victory Road, I've got my final rival battle with Serena, and this rival battle goes really easily. I ended up setting up 3 Quiver Dances, and as you can imagine, it was kind of just a sweep from there. That all being said, the last thing I do before challenging the Elite Four is bring my team up to the level cap, and with that, I go to challenge Malva in my first Elite Four battle. She leads the battle with Pyroar as I lead with Crustle. Pyroar starts out by going for a Noble Roar that lowers my attack and special attack as I go for a Shell Smash. With that Shell Smash, I'm now able to outspeed Pyroar, and I go for an Earthquake on her that finishes her off as next out comes Torkoal. Even with a pretty beefy defense stat, Torkoal is no match for an Earthquake as that leads into Talonflame. Talonflame is able to outspeed and hit me with a Flare Blitz that brings me down to about half as I'm able to go for a 4-time super effective Rock Slide that finishes her off. Last out is Chandelure, and a single Earthquake is able to OHKO as that wins me my first Elite Four battle. For my next fight, I decide to go up against Wickstrom, and he leads the battle with Klefki as I lead with Heracross. Klefki starts out by setting up a Torment as I set up a Swords Dance. On the following turn, Klefki sets up a Spikes as I go for an Earthquake on her, and it ends up one-shotting as next out comes Scizor. Against Scizor, just to be safe, I go for a close combat that will for sure one-shot, and it does, as this leads into Probopass. Against Probopass, I start out by going for a Chip Away just to break that sturdy as I get hit by a Flash Cannon, and it doesn't do too much. I then, with the sturdy broken, go for an Earthquake, but I honestly probably should have gone for a close combat, as next out comes Aegislash, and I'm really scared here. Because of that Torment that got set up earlier, I can't actually go for another Earthquake on Aegislash, and I can't even go for a close combat either because Aegislash is a Ghost type. The only thing I can do is switch, so I move into Vanilla, who gets nailed on the switch in by an Iron Head that brings her down to 44 HP. It's at this point that I decide to take a risk with Vanilla, and I go for an Earthquake, and thankfully it ends up finishing off Aegislash, winning me my second Elite Four battle. For my next Elite Four battle, it was a bit of a toss-up between Drasna and Seabold, but I figured Drasna is a little bit easier to get out of the way, so I decide to go with her. She leads the battle with Dialga as I lead with Vanilla. The first thing I do is set up a Swords Dance as Dialga hits me with a Dragon Pulse that brings me down to 90 HP. On the next turn, I'm able to outspeed Dialga and finish her off with an Earthquake as that leads into Noivern. Noivern is a pretty fast Pokemon, so I was a bit worried I wouldn't outspeed, but thankfully I'm able to, and I finish off Noivern with a Poison Jab. Next out is Altaria, who also gets OHKO'd by a Poison Jab, and last out is Druddigon. Druddigon is a really slow Pokemon, so I'm able to outspeed and hit a single Poison Jab that wins me my third Elite Four battle. I'm now on to my final battle with Seabold, and he leads the battle with Glitzer as I lead with Crustle. Glitzer starts out by hitting me with a Water Pulse that does an insane amount of damage, bringing me all the way down to 26 HP as I decide to set up a Shell Smash. That Shell Smash allows me to outspeed Glitzer and finish him off with an X-Scissor as that leads into Barbarnacle. Against Barbarnacle, I go for an Earthquake that ends up one-shotting as next out is Starmie, who is a really fast Pokemon. I was extremely worried I wouldn't outspeed Starmie here, but I decided to take the risk, and thankfully I do, and I'm able to hit an X-Scissor one-shotting Starmie in the process. Last out is Gyarados, so I just go for a Rock Slide, and with that, I win my final Elite Four battle. With all of that being said, and with the rest of the run behind us, I move on to fight champion Diantha in my final battle of this run. Diantha leads the battle with Hawlucha as I lead with Scolipede. I start the battle off by setting up a Swords Dance as Hawlucha starts out by setting up a Swords Dance. I didn't really expect Hawlucha to not hit me there, so I just set up another Swords Dance as Hawlucha goes for an X-Scissor and does essentially no damage. I could have set up a third Swords Dance here, but I don't really want to style on Diantha that bad, so I just went for a Poison Jab and Hawlucha went down. Next out is Tyrantrum, and for this, I'm actually really scared he got one-shotted by an Earthquake. But it's fine though, because Goodra gets sent out and easily gets taken out by a Poison Jab. Aurorus gets sent in, then gets one-shotted by Earthquake as that leads into Gourgeist, who just goes down to a Poison Jab. Last out is Diantha's ace Pokemon Mega Gardevoir, and this could be a little bit bad. I lied. You know how it goes. It was just a one-shot with a Poison Jab, and that wins me my final battle of this run. Deathless, baby! We Deathless, baby! I haven't had a Deathless run in a minute. This Bug-type one was actually easy as. It was really fun though. It was really fun. I love my Scolipede. I love Scolipede. I love Crustle. I love all these bug types, man. They're really the best. Oh god. I didn't think I was gonna be able to sweep with Scolipede, but I guess I guess it is just that easy. Vanilla clutched up. Vanilla clutched up. But yeah, no, it was all in all, it was a pretty good run. With that being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like and maybe subscribing, because that would really help me out. And with that being said, that was my attempt at a Pokemon Y Hardcore Nuzlocke using only bug types.